Today we will discuss in the first module two important topics. One is what is the difference between gross value added and gross domestic product. So recently gross value added was introduced, which is given up by the Reserve Bank of India, and they have shifted to the GDP itself. Now if a short question is asked about what is the difference between GVA and GDP, you must be making that point more clear. Gross value added is the value of goods and services produced in a particular area or in different sectors. But gross domestic product is the value of all goods and services produced in the country. See the difference. GVA is the value of goods and services produced in a particular area or sectors. But GDP is the value of all goods and services produced in the country. Now, why the GVA was introduced in the Modi government was to find out what is happening in different sectors of the economy, whether they are able to achieve the objectives laid down in the planning, whether there is some constraints available, what is happening in the areas of development, so they can design policy accordingly. Another important difference between the two is GVA always looks into the supply side, that is production side, but GDP looks into the point of the demand side, that is consumption side. So that is a major difference between GVA and GDP. To calculate the GVA at the base prices, we have to take into account the important factors, that is GVA at base prices is equal to compensation to the employees, that is CE, plus operating surplus or mixed income, plus consumption of fixed capital, CFC, plus production taxes, not product tax, production taxes, minus production subsidies. So what is the clear points which have to be borne in mind is GVA at base prices is equal to, one is compensation to the employees plus operating surplus plus consumption of fixed capital plus production taxes minus production services, especially production subsidies. Services, production subsidies. If you want to get GDP from this GVA, then GDP is equal to the sum total of GVA at base prices plus product taxes minus product subsidies. So you can also calculate GDP from GVA also. But the RBI has given up this methodology of calculating GVA, and because GDP helps in international comparisons. If you have to compare our GDP with foreign countries, it is better than not the GVA. So cross-country comparisons, cross-country analysis, definitely we require GDP. So this can be asked as a short question. What is the difference between GVA and GDP? Another important essay that can be asked is what are the factors or constraints that stands on the way to the development in our country. A lot of planning is done, 64 years of planning plus Niti Aayog, but the major problems has not been solved. So what are the constraints we have in our system? For this we will divide into certain factors contributing to the slow development of our country. First, take the economic factors. In economic factors, the most important point which we have discussed in the first and second classes, that low per capita income or low national income of the country. I will give the example of making a comparison with China. For example, in 1975, the total national income of China was $146 billion. And at that time, India's national income was $140 billion. See, 146 and 140, a slight difference. But if you look at the per capita income at that time, in 1975, the per capita income of China was $156. At that time, India's per capita income was $203. Even if the per capita income in India was better, national income $146 billion was the national income of China, and we had only $140 billion. But in per capita income, China had only $156 only. Per capita means national income divided by population. At that time, our per capita income was $203. So we were in a better position. But now what has happened? The national income of China is 5 times higher than that of India. That is a very important point. They were able to increase the national income at a very high rate, and it has emerged into a second important economy in the world. But in India, we are not able to, even though population of China is very high when compared to India, we are not able to achieve rapid economic development because of the slight increase in the national income every year. Of course, national income has increased a lot, but I will give another example. Shanghai district of China, the GDP of that particular area is almost $400 billion, which is almost equivalent to the GDP of state level Maharashtra. Maharashtra state GDP is coming to nearly 4. Shanghai is only a district of China. So what has happened there? Experimentation. Lot of experiment is going on in China. Lot of innovation is going on in China. And lot of activities. They are encouraging almost all foreigners to come to Shanghai, start their ventures. But whatever that is produced is sent it out. Actually, they are exported from China. So the economy has developed a fast rate. So first important constraint which India has to face is we have to increase our national income, we have to increase our per capita income to a manifold times. If you have more income, there will be more savings and more production also. So that is the first constraint which has to be removed. Second, rapid growth of population. If you look at India, if you study any problem, the one important point that strikes is this rapid growth of population. Up to 1921, no country in the world had a higher growth rate. They were almost in the same level. Up to 1921. What was the reason? Because the death rate was also very high, birth rate was also very high. Birth rate is also very high, death rate is also very high. But after 1921 to almost in the 60s, it's called the period of health revolution. Lot of medicines. We are able to control almost all the diseases. So suddenly the death rate came down and the birth rate remained at a high level. So here we have to study a small, to give a small note, a small question can be asked, what is demographic transition? Demographic transition is, the first stage of demographic transition is up to 1921, high birth rate and high death rate. And we will not feel the burden of growth of population. If 100 people are born, 98 people used to die. So practically there will not be any burden to the government, burden to the families, etc. But after 1921 to the mid 60s, there was a sudden fall in the death rate because of the health revolution. So almost all the countries started entering into the second stage of demographic transition. Those countries which were suddenly shifted from the second stage to third stage, they became the developed countries of the world. What is the third stage? Death rate also comes down, birth rate also comes down. If 20 people are born, 18 people is to die or 19 people is to die. So there is a slight change only, but it will not affect the economy, it will not affect the government, it will not affect the people also. So it is called third stage of demographic transition. First stage, second stage and third stage. So India is even today in the second stage of demographic transition. Second stage of demographic transition. Those countries which are, those states which are shifted from the second stage to the third stage at the earliest, such states has a lot of changes in education, health, or a lot of other areas also. So the first state to enter into the third stage of demographic transition is Kerala. Then Pondicherry, then Tamil Nadu. Slowly southern states are entering into the third stage. But overall situation, if you look, India is even today in the second stage of demographic transition. So what happens? The dependent rate increases. If the dependent rate increases, naturally whatever income is generated by the family is used for the children, education, other purposes. They have little money to spend. A recent estimate has clearly stated that 76% of the children in India are malnutrition, malnutrition people, so they will be having less nutritional diet. 76%, because they do not have more income, families do not have more income. So rapid growth of population is playing a very important part in our country, so it has to be reduced as early as possible. Coming to the population itself, we have another point called unemployment as well as underemployment, disguised unemployment, etc., which I have discussed in the class 1 and 2, part 1 and 2. Now, why unemployment takes place in the country? Because there is a rapid growth of population on the one side, and the second one is we are not able to give alternative occupation to the growing population. That is because of these two reasons. One is the rapid growth of population, everybody knows. But the second is we are not able to provide rapid growing population employment. So unemployment is on the increase. A recent estimate again given by OECD, Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development, OECD, has clearly stated that 46% of the people ranging between the 15 and 29 in India is unemployed. But the government says that only 7%. But OECD has clearly stated that the people ranging between 15 to 29 of age have 46% of the population, they are actually not fully employed, unemployed. So this problem has to be tackled as early as possible in our country. Poor educational standards leads to unemployment to a high level. People may be educated. Lot of dropouts are taking place in our country, especially among the Muslim women, not in Kerala, because Malappuram has become the education hub. But if you look at India, almost 50% of the Muslim women, they are dropouts. In between they stop studying. In the rural sector, we have, due to lack of infrastructure, definitely people are not able to go to the schools. So these are the problems. This has to be tackled. Another point is poor infrastructure. I will give another example, poor infrastructure. In the rural sector, the fruits and vegetables that is produced, of which 40% is wasted. 40%, 40. Because of the lack of good infrastructure, cold storage, lack of supply chain management. This will change. Definitely it has to change. We must give more importance to food processing industry. Actually it was neglected. But because the Indian people, they want to directly eat from the plant and they are not ready to eat from plant. Another plant is factory. Processing industry, food processing industry has to develop. So 40% fruits and vegetables are wasted in our country. So that is another important point, poor infrastructure, lack of well-built roads, lack of cold storage, supply chain management, lack of agro-based industries. So these are another constraint which is not helping in development side. That is very important. Technological backwardness. In India, side by side with the new technology, we have the most primitive technology also. If you look at all developed countries, whenever a new technology has been found out, they welcome. So they are ready to make a change. The trade unions, the employer, all will make the changes within a short period of time. So almost all the factories will be on the same level. But India, side by side with the new technology, the most modern technology, we have the primitive technology also. So what happens, whenever the new technology comes, a lot of new industries create profit, but a lot of other industries, they create huge losses and they go out of the country itself, throwing thousands of people out of employment. So that is a serious problem which has to be tackled. Technological backwardness, unutilized, underutilized and misutilization of natural resources. That is another very serious point. That is another important constraint standing on the way of development. So policy framers has to concentrate on this particular area. Natural resources are either unutilized. Lot of resources are available in the country but is practically not at all utilized. I'll give a few examples. Underutilization, I'll give an example. India is a country which has immense coastal line. Backwaters are there, rivers are there. But only 10% of the fish are catched by the fishermen in the country. Only 10%. The 90% is not utilized. It is only recently that government is giving more importance to fisheries and other area. Similarly, minerals and metals. A lot of minerals and metals are available in the country. It is only recently that petrol extraction started in the northeastern states. It was available already. Assam was given more importance, but other northeastern states were neglected. In agriculture also, northeastern state was neglected. It is recently that organic farming started in a big way in the northeastern states, and Sikkim has become the first state in the country to become 100% organic farming. So resource either it remains idle, is not at all utilized, or it is underutilized, not fully utilized, or there is also misutilization of resources. I'll give an example. For metallurgical energy, we require high grade coal, called metallurgical coal and high grade coal, which has to be, you have to use very carefully because the quantity is less. Smelting of iron in the iron and steel industry we require is high grade coal. Lignite is another coal which is of low quality, which can be used for burning purposes, other purposes. But in the beginning, a lot of these resources, especially high grade coal, was misutilized. Forest is misutilized. At the time of independence, we had only almost 1/3 of the area under forest. 33% area was under forest. Now it is brought down to almost 20%. If we are not properly maintaining the environment, climate will change. A lot of flora and fauna will be lost forever. There will be extinction of a lot of animals. So this is another area where we have to concentrate. Capital is lacking. For every growth, what we require is genuine capital. The capital has to be created within the country and not bought from outside. If you are giving importance to FDI, if you are giving importance to collaborations, etc. from the foreign, actually we are bringing the technology, bringing the foreigners into the country, not generating genuine savings, genuine investment in the country. So that is another area where we have to concentrate. So this is the area or economic side. A lot of economic factors contributed to the slow growth of economy in our country. So these situations are changing after the 1991 new economic policy, after the economic reforms, and slowly economies has been having a strength, it is going up and up. But with the coming of the pandemic, the situation has changed again. Now, what are the social factors standing on the way to development? Another important area where we have to concentrate. It is not only economic factors, but there are certain social factors standing on the way to development. There are 5 important social factors which are standing on the way to development. That is caste system, joint family system, loss of inheritance, influence of religion, and institution of marriage. These 5 are the important social factors also standing on the way to the development of our country. Caste system, joint family system, law of inheritance, influence of religion, and institution of marriage. Take the first one, caste system, widely prevalent in our country. If you look at any developed country, you cannot find there is a caste based economy or caste based society. So there is always a caste conflict in the country, which is not always good to the economy. Of course, in European countries, in England or in America, there is a conflict between based on colors, black and white. But in our country, we have different caste, Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra, and there is no interdining, there is no intermarriage, there is always, even the political parties, when they keep certain people as candidates, they first take into consideration the caste important situation, religion, etc. Considered. Caste system has to be completely disintegrated. Kerala was the first state in our country which has removed the caste system in the country because of the social reformers and the communistic government. With the coming of the first communism government, they did not have any class or caste discrimination, and Narayana Guru, Chattami Swami, Ayanar, Ayangali, etc., almost the social reformers, they have made a big change. So that is why in education, health, as well as there is no much barriers as far as the caste and religion is concerned. So that is very important. Joint family system. Even today in India, joint family still exists. So that is very important. In all advanced countries, you can say joint family system has disintegrated. After a particular stage, even the children will not look after the father and mother. They have shifted. What are the 3 good advantages of joint family system? One is land will not be subdivided. If you have a 10 acre, always will be 10 acre. It is not subdivided. There will be head of the family, looks after all the people. So people need not worry. He looks after the whole thing. Karnavar, Karta എന്നൊക്കെ പറയണം. Third, the cost of living will be less. In a joint family system, cost of living will be less. Because everything is purchased in bulk. Bulk purchases lead to discount. So you get all things at a low price because you have to buy in bulk. I'll give an example in Karnataka where 340 people live under one roof. the biggest joint family system in the world. 340 people living under one room, one roof. There are doctors, engineers, government employees, some people are farmers, almost 500 acres are there. So everything will be looked after by the head of the family only. So the cost of living will be less. So there are the three advantages. But we say that in the economy, if development has to take place, joint family system has to disintegrate. Why? There is lack of individual initiative. Every person has a individual qualities, his own qualities. That cannot be shown in a joint family system because everything is looked after by the head of the family. So the first very important point is you will have lack of initiative, individual initiative. If a BSc agriculture person in a joint family system, he says that what we are doing in agriculture today is a waste, we have to go for so and so new technology, the head of the family will not allow. So finally he breaks up from the joint family system and starts his own agriculture farm. In such a way, disintegration takes place. Every person has an initiative, individual initiative, it has to be respected and they can do the job also. That is the first advantage of joint family. New generation will not work. They become lazy. What is the reason? So long as there is head of the family, I need not worry. Because everything will look after by the head of the family. If I am not working, he will look after each person equally, without any discrimination. So the new generation, they will not work because they said that my line is kept with the head of the family, my portion is also available here, so I need not work. So lack of that individual initiative on the one side, second, new generation will not work. And third, very important, so he starts asking for money and finally there will be a fight among the members of the family and slowly the joint family system disintegrates. If you start a new unit of your own, that is called nuclear family. Joint family is converted into nuclear family. Again, the Kerala is the first state in India where the joint family system is almost disintegrated. There is a saying that when a new marriage takes place in Kerala, within 6 months a new nuclear family will come into existence. Within 6 months a new nuclear family. So we have to start from scratch. Both wife and the person has to work hard to generate more and more income. In this way the income goes out. When the income rises, you have more savings, investment and the capital formation takes place. So joint family system is very strong in India. Even today in different parts of the world, joint family is disintegrated, but in Kerala, if you go to Bihar, Orissa or Gujarat, we have a system called Hindu undivided family. Almost all the business houses, they live jointly. So this joint family system has to disintegrate our country. Every person has his own ability to do something that has to be given more popular, it has to be created more popular, they have to work very hard. Loss of inheritance, that is another important serious problem in our country. The law has been created. Whatever wealth has been created by the father has to be distributed among the children equally. So what happens if a person has 10 acres of land and if he has 5 children, it will be divided into 2 acres. There is a law. Whatever wealth is created by the head of the family, it has to be distributed equally among the members of the family. If the 2 acre, a person who has 2 acre, if he has 5 children, it becomes 40 cents. If this goes on continuously for years and years, what will happen in India? The land will become so tiny that cultivation is almost impossible. The land will become a small piece of land where you cannot cultivate. We cannot use scientific methods of cultivation also. So this is another serious problem. So we have to pass a law. Agricultural land should not be subdivided. Otherwise this land will be subdivided. Not only subdivision, there is a fragmentation of holding also. And this will, if a person had say 15 acres, 5 acres in one place, 5 acres another place, and 5 acres another place, if he has 5 children, all will claim share in the different areas. So it becomes 1 acre itself. So he will be concentrating only in particular area, other areas will be neglected. That will affect the productivity of the country. So law of inheritance is another serious social factor contributing to low development. Next is influence of religion. Religion is playing a very important part in our country, standing on the way to development. No religion is supporting country for economic development. In all advanced countries you can see that religion is not allowed to play a part in economic or politics. They will not allow religion to play a part in economics. But if you look at India, almost all the religions, they have a role in the economic activity also. This has to be removed as early as possible. Huge influence of religion in economic area. What should be produced, what should not be produced, what should be eaten, what should not be eaten. I'll give an example. Export industry in meat has declined by almost 36%. Almost all the Gulf countries, they used to send meat from India. But due to certain religion factors, cow should not be slaughtered. So almost 36,000 crores worth of foreign currency has been lost last year. So in economic area, religion should not play a part. Religious sentiment should not be introduced. So influence of religion. Institution of marriage, very important. That is another special case in India. If in India, if a person is born, he has to marry. Child marriage was in our country. Early marriages were in our country. Now there is a scheme, the report has come that the women's age has to be increased to 21 and males 24. It has not accepted. Now it is 18, 21 only. 18 for female and 21 for male. So in the earlier there was child marriage. There was even early marriages. What will happen? See, a girl, if it is of 14 years, 14 to almost 35 is the childbearing period. Before 14, 16 was there. Then 16, 18, then 18, 21. Now it is going to be changed to 21, 24 if it is accepted by the government. Lot of religion, some religions are also against this also. So, the childbearing period is almost 11 years. So there is always possibility of having more children. That is another reason why the population is increasing in our country. Even if it's 18 years, 18 to 35 means almost we have 17 years. 17 years of the childbearing period. So there is every possibility of having more children. So this age has to be increased. So marriage. In India we are not taking into account the physical side, economic side, psychological side for marriage. If you are born in India, whether you are physically fit or not, whether you are economically fit or not, whether you are psychologically fit or not, you will marry. And this is one of the reasons for the rapid growth of population in our country. So this is the social factor. And the third important constraint which has to be removed is for fast development of the country is the political factors. So we have to divide into three: economic factors, social factors, and third one is called the political factors. Up to 1947 we blamed foreigners. Why India has not developed? Because of the policy of the Britishers, because of the policies of the Portuguese, Dutch, Muslims, Persia, people came from Persia and ruled. People from Afghanistan came ruled in our country. So we are blaming the foreigners because that we are not able to achieve rapid development. But after 1947, why we are not able to remove all the bottlenecks, constraints to achieve rapid economic development? After 47, what happened? Why we are not able to develop at a fast rate? Lack of stable government. For every development purposes, what we require is a stable government. Whenever new government comes into power, all other, even the opposition has to support for the good things. But the aim of the opposition is to how to put down that particular government. Stability is highly essential for development of any country. Then we require peace and prosperity. If I want to start a venture, first I have to look into consideration is what is the situation in the country. If the government attracts FDI from foreign countries, they will see what is happening in India. There must be peace in the country, there must be prosperity in it. No people will start a venture in Jammu and Kashmir if there is no peace and prosperity in that particular area. If there is continuous strikes in a particular area, people will be reluctant to start their investment in that particular state. So what the people require is their peace in the country, and there is a safety to life, property, etc. There is another important side, the lack of peace and prosperity. Corruption. We are talking about governance, good governance. But if corruption, nepotism, favoritism, bribery exists in the country, no development will take place. Good governance is very important. So all this area, the government is trying to make some improvement, but not with much success. So it is high time that India, the factors which I have said in economic side, social side, as well as in the political side has to be changed a lot so that India can achieve fast growth, and within 2050, India can become a superpower in the world. So these are two topics coming under module 1. Now we will be shifting to the second module. Second module is basically concerned with the primary sector, that is agriculture. A lot of topics are there in agriculture where essays can be asked, small questions can be asked. The first one is agriculture sector. Importance of agriculture sector, a question if is asked. Give an importance of agriculture in our country. If you look at India, almost all the areas agriculture is very important. As a source of food for the people and fodder for the cattle. Food for the people and fodder for the cattle. Second largest population in the world. They must be fed. In the case of cattle population, we are number 1 in the world. In human population, we are second, but in cattle population, we are number 1. Almost 30 crores of cattle are available. They must be fed, they must be given fodder, they must be given food. From where it will come? Only from the agriculture. So as a source of food as well as fodder for the cattle, we must give importance to agriculture. Importance of agriculture. If you look at the share in the national income, almost 15 to 16%. It's coming down. It is a good sign that India is developing. 14-15% of the national income is coming from agriculture. You think that it is very small. It is not small. Other sectors has increased at a fast rate, and that is why the share is coming down in agriculture. But in terms of money, it is increasing. This will be compared with the other developed countries. It is very visible. In almost all the developed countries, especially in America, 2% of the national income comes from agriculture. In UK, 3 to 4%. Every country it is below 10%. But in India, almost 14-15% of the national income is coming from agriculture. So we cannot neglect agriculture as a share from the national income. Look at employment. From the employment point of view, agriculture cannot be neglected. Of course, the share is coming down is a sign that other sectors people are getting more jobs. Employment. Even today, major employer is agriculture in our country. If agriculture is neglected, what will happen? Thousands and lakhs of people will be left with no job. So from the point of view of the employment also, we cannot neglect agriculture. If you look at our exports, till recently major exports were related to agriculture. We used to send spices, we used to send sugar, lot of agriculture commodities, eleka, chukka, grambu, spices. Cotton textiles. Cotton textile actually, cotton must be produced, cotton has to be produced, that is coming from agriculture. Major industries, jute industry, very prominent industry at the time of independence. Almost all cashew nuts. If you look at Kerala, cashew nut industry, coir industry, all these industries require agriculture as raw material. So we cannot neglect agriculture because major industries at present in India take agriculture as the raw material. Of course, industries are also now coming out in a big way, and we are also sending a lot of industrial commodities to foreign countries. Recently, you can heard in the newspaper that Kerala Automobile Limited is sending almost 30 auto rickshaws, electric auto rickshaws to Nepal. Recently, machines are going outside. That is a good sign. But a major part of our exports consisting of agriculture based industries or agriculture as the raw material. So we cannot neglect agriculture. Agriculture prosperity leads to industrial prosperity. That is very important. How agriculture prosperity leads to industrial prosperity? Agriculture, very important. Whenever the agriculture people's income rises, they demand more and more industrial goods. For example, when an agriculture person gets good income from agriculture, naturally he will demand for any consumer durable goods. So that industry will develop. He uses more and more fertilizers, he uses pesticides, he uses implements, tractors, power tiller, sowing machine, harvesting machine, thrashing machines. So whenever the agriculture prosperity takes place, he demands more and more consumer both durable and non-durable goods. So that industry will develop. Because a large number of people even today live in villages. Even today almost 65% of the population are living in villages. So when the agriculture income rises, they demand for more and more industrial goods. So that is very important. So this essay, short essay, you have to write the importance of agriculture in Indian economy. If you look at any area, you can see that agriculture dominates. Now, very serious, important essay comes from land reforms. Now, land reform we have to study in two phases, phase 1 and phase 2. Phase 1 up to the new economic reforms and phase 2 after the new economic. Before new economic reforms we had a certain phase land reform measures, and after 1991 some more land reform measures were added actually. So we have the old reforms also in our country, at the same time new additions are also taking place. So phase 1 and phase 2. I will give the example phase 1. In phase 1, land reforms consisting of 5 heads. Phase 1, land reform measures, phase 1. In phase 1, the 5 headings are: 1 is abolition of intermediaries, 2 tenancy reforms, 3 ceiling on land holdings, 4 consolidation of holdings, 5 cooperative farming societies. That is phase 1, land reform measures. 1 is abolition of intermediaries, 2 tenancy reforms, 3 ceiling on land holdings, 4 consolidation of holdings, and 5 cooperative farming societies. Now take the first one. Each one can be asked as a short question, or an essay can be asked. A big essay can be asked. Take the first one, abolition of intermediaries. Who is intermediary? Who is standing between the government and the actual tiller? A person who is standing between actual tiller and the government is called intermediary. In India, we had 3 important intermediaries. One is called Zamindari system, second is Mahalwari system, and third one is Riyatwari system. Actually, Zamindar is very common, everybody knows. But the Hindu kings and the Muslim kings introduced a system called Mahalwari and Riyatwari system. Now in Zamindari system, when the Britishers, when they introduced this Permanent Settlement Act by Lord Cornwallis in 1793, the government had certain aim behind them. If you know English, at the same time, if you are always loyal to the British government, 100, 200, 300 acres of land will be given for 99 years. That is called Permanent Settlement Act, for which we have to pay a rent which will not change till 99 years. So that is very important. So they want to create certain people in our country who are enlightened person. So government thought that revenue will be obtained. So they gave certain land to some people who were always loyal to the British government to cultivate the land. So they thought that since they know English, the changes that is taking place in different parts, they are well aware. So they will use scientific methods of cultivation and the productivity will rise. So with this intention, they started a system called Zamindari system. But what happened in effect? The pressure on land started increasing. Those people, they do not have any land with them. They approached the Zamindars. So the Zamindar thought this is a good idea. If he has 100 acres, he will give 5 acres to 20% and collect huge rent from them. And he became a landlord, and the system is called absentee landlordism. The landlord is absent in the field. He is subletting the lands to certain farmers. And huge rent is taken. He can be, the farmer, if he is not interested, the landlord can expel the farmers from the land at any time. He exploited the peasantry. So he is an intermediary standing between the government. So whatever government benefit gives, that goes not to the farmers, actual tillers of the soil, but goes to the Zamindar. The same system was Mahalwari system and Riyatwari system created by the Hindu and Muslim kings in the country. So what we have done, legislation has been passed by all the states. Here another point very important, since agriculture is a state subject, the law has to be passed by the respective state governments. So abolition of intermediaries when it was introduced by all the states, if for example I will give the example, Kerala is the first state in our country which abolished the intermediaries without giving a single pie as compensation. But the second state may be taking say 2 to 3 years. By the time the zamindars will escape by selling the land or subletting the land, dividing the land among their families to escape from intermediaries, from the law. So almost all the states in the country has passed this law, abolition of intermediaries. There should not be any intermediary between the. So even today, in different parts of our country, landlordism still exists. In Bihar and Orissa, Rajasthan, even today, bonded labor exists. So this has to be, so all this law is only in paper, but not properly implemented. So Kerala is the only state where this abolition of intermediaries has been completed without giving compensation. Palakkad example, ജമ്മിമാരെല്ലാം പോയി, നമ്മൾ കൊയ്യും വയലുകളെല്ലാം നമ്മളെയാണ് പൈങ്കിളിയെ എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞിട്ട് ആ ഭൂമി മൊത്തം അവരുടെ കയ്യിലായി, without giving an paisa compensation. So other states also pass this law, but it's not properly implemented even today. So first point is abolition of intermediaries. 2 is tenancy reforms. So government is fully aware that there are a lot of tenants for cultivating the land of the landlords. So something has to be done to the tenants. Tenants means patakar. In India we have different types of tenants. One is called occupancy tenant. If a short question is asked on tenancy reforms, you must be able to answer. Tenancy reforms. Occupancy tenants means for years and years a person is cultivating the same piece of land. It's called occupancy tenant. For generations. 2, tenants at will. Tenants at will means he can be removed by the landlord very easily. He can be expelled from the land any time. So he will not be given a permanent land for many years. For 1 or 2 cultivation, he will be given a particular land, then he will be shifted to some other plant, some other area, then again can come back. Never a permanent place will be given for cultivation. They are called tenants at will. They can be expelled from the land at any time. And third one is very interesting, subtenants. A tenant will take say 10 acres from the landlord. He will cultivate only 2 acres of land. Remaining 8 acres will be distributed among the farmers to cultivate and collects rent from them, and this rent will be given to the landlord. Subtenants. This is also very high in our country. Of course, occupancy tenants are very less in our country. Tenants at will are large in number, and subtenants also exist in the country. So for these tenants, what is done by the government? So government has passed laws. The first one is fixation of rent, because the landlords used to charge exorbitant rates of rent. So law has been passed by all the states, a rent was fixed. Before they used to collect almost 50-60% of their produce goes to the landlord, remaining only get obtained by the, so they will be under poverty. Now rent has been fixed, but here you have to say that the rent varies from state to state and within the state from area to area depending upon the fertility of the soil. But in no cases it is more than 1/3 of the produce, 1/4 of the produce, 1/5 of the produce, or 1/6 of the produce. So the highest rent was 33.33%. So remaining major part is in the hands of the tenants. 1/3 of the produce or 1/4, that is comes 25%. 1/5 20%. 1/6 16.67%. So that is very important. Tenancy reforms. So fixation of rent. 2. Security to tenure. Tenure means holding of land. Security to tenure means if a person pays the rent correctly, does not do any damage to the land, he cannot be expelled. Even if he is expelled, he must be given compensation. So security is now obtained to the holder of the land. So he pays the rent correctly, does not do any damage to the land, he cannot be expelled. Even if he is expelled, he must be given compensation. The third important point is ownership right on the land. Third important tenancy reform is ownership right on land. Now I will give you an example. If a landlord wants to sell his land, first preference must be given to the tenant. If he says that I am not having the money to buy, he can give to some other person, because he has attachment to that particular land. He has worked hard in that particular piece of land, so he wants to get the ownership right. So third important tenancy reform is ownership right on the land. But if the government was full-heartedly supported this scheme, the fund has to be given by the government to purchase the land, which they can collect from the farmer in installments. But just saying that if the landlord wants to sell the land, first preference must be given to the tenant. If he does not want, then he can sell to some other person. But if the government wholeheartedly supported the system, the fund has to be first given by the government to the tenant, which he can repay in installments for a longer period. So he becomes the owner of the land if the landlord wants to sell. So these are the three important tenancy reforms. If a short question is asked, you must be able to answer this by giving these three important points. Third important land reform measure is ceiling on land holdings. Ceiling means what is the maximum land that can be held by a person. If he has extra land, that must be given to the government, and government will distribute this land to the landless laborers. So a good concept. Actually it is a socialist concept. It is a Sarvodaya concept. Everybody knows of the Sarvodaya movement undertaken by Vinoba Bhave, Bhudan movement. The main aim was to collect land from the people, especially big landlords. If they are ready to part with their land, it will be collected by the Vinoba Bhave and will be distributed to the landless people. But that is only a voluntary NGO program. But government passed laws. Different states passed ceiling on land holdings, by which if any person has land more than what is said in the law, will be taken by the government and will be distributed among the landless laborers. So what is the maximum land that can be held by a person? See, here the model law was given by the central government, because it can be accepted or it can be rejected also, or make some modifications. Model law was created by the central government. If it is a well irrigated land, and if you can cultivate at least 2 crops a year, you can keep 18 standard acres. If it is a well irrigated land, highly fertile land, cultivate at least 2 crops in a year, you can keep 18 standard acres. But if land is not fully cultivable, you can cultivate at least only 1 crop in a year, you can keep 27 acres. And if it is a barren land, pasture land, not pasture land, barren land, only some crops can be cultivated. If unexpected monsoon takes place, then we can keep 54 standard acres. So 18 acres, 27 acres and 54 acres. If any family has more than that, it will be taken by the government and will be distributed among the landless laborers. So this system of ceiling on land holdings became very popular in almost all the states, and the Kerala is again the first state in the country where the ceiling has been almost done properly. Lot of excess land, surplus land was taken by the government and distributed among the landless laborers. That is the concept. Of course, West Bengal took a lot of surplus land, but does not distribute it even a single unit to the farmers. There the system is called sharecropping system. But in the Kerala is the only state where the land was taken and the surplus land was distributed among the landless laborers. So that is a very important point to remember. So what is the idea behind ceilings? Excess land will be taken, surplus land will be taken by the government, and finally this land will be distributed among the landless laborers. So again I will say that because it is a state subject, if the law is passed in Kerala, with some modification will come to other states, say after 3 to 4 years. By the time they will escape from the ceiling. So that is why it is not become effective all over the country. But Kerala, since it is the first state, lot of excess land, surplus land from the landlords were taken by the government and distributed among the landless laborers. Lot of laborers got title on the land. So third important land reform measure is ceiling on land holdings. Fourth one is consolidation of holdings. The only state where consolidation of holding has been conducted is in Punjab. Now what is the reason? There force was applied. Force. If a person has 5 acres of land and side by lot of small farmers are having say 10 cents, 15 cents, they have to part their land to this big landlord and leave. He must either give up the agriculture or take the money and go to some other place, either purchase interior parts of Punjab and purchase more land or give up agriculture altogether. Compulsory consolidation is done only in Punjab. No other states have passed this law. Because forcefully you are grabbing the lands of the people. A big landlord, if it has 5 acres and side by side a lot of farmers are having only 10, 15, all this land will be taken and given to this big landlord. And that is why we say that the Green Revolution succeeded in Punjab, because the farm was bigger size, consolidated, a bigger size land has been created. But no other states dared. So consolidation of holding was done only by Punjab. You can say even Haryana, because Haryana at that time was joined with Punjab only. The 2 states were not there. So Punjab was the first state to introduce consolidation of holding by compulsory consolidation and not voluntarily. Where compulsory consolidation fails, the 5th important land reform measure is called cooperative joint farming societies. Where consolidation fails, you can pass the law. Cooperative society law will be created, non-cooperative society law can be applied, and you can start cooperative joint farming societies. What is a cooperative joint farming societies? It is a voluntary association of farmers, they join together. They will remove the boundaries, have a bigger piece of land where they can cultivate scientifically by using scientific methods of cultivation like tractors, power tiller, sowing machine, harvesting machine, thrashing machines. In this way, they are able to use a bigger piece of land, bigger piece with larger scale of production, and productivity will rise. And each person will get his share according to the land he surrendered to the society. So it's a voluntary concept without applying force. Consolidation was a force applied by Punjab, and that is one of the reasons why Khalistan movement took place in Punjab. A lot of people who lost their jobs, they became extremists. But this is a voluntary concept. So what is the best method of land reform? We say that cooperative joint farming. But cooperative joint farming is slowly coming in India. The main reason is it is very difficult to bring the farmers together. There is always litigation. വ്യവഹാരം കോടതിയിൽ വ്യവഹാരങ്ങളൊക്കെയാണ് ഒരു ഫാർമറും മറ്റേ ഫാർമർ തമ്മിൽ നിന്ന് ഉടക്കായിരിക്കും. Either water dispute or land dispute. So it is very difficult to bring them together. And force cannot be applied. It is a voluntary association of people. If they come in a big way, for example, collective farming system societies played a very important part in Russia and China, in Brazil. So that is very important. So what if a question is asked, what are the land reform measures that is adopted in India as phase 1, then the 5 points must be explained. One is abolition of intermediaries, 2 tenancy reforms, 3 ceiling on land holdings, 4 consolidation of holdings, and 5 cooperative joint farming societies. It still exists, that reforms still exist in our country. But phase 2 of land reforms started from new economic reforms of 1991. In one class I said that actually the new economic reforms neglected agriculture. All other sectors were given more importance, industrial sector, export sector, even capital sector, money market sector, everything was given importance, but they neglected agriculture. A country like India cannot neglect agriculture. So it was only after 2000 that agriculture policy came into existence. So a lot of change in land reforms has to be done as phase 2. It is in accordance with the World Trade Organization norms, WTO norms. So in phase 2, more importance was given to mapping of records of land records, and giving conclusive title. So that is the first, mapping of the land records. 2, fair and equitable land acquisition. Lot of problems were created when the land acquisition is to take place in different parts of the country. You heard about Singur, lot of area, lot of problems were created. So acquisition of land, some norms must be there, fair and equitable norms must be there. So more importance given to that particular area. And third, proper leasing policy, effective and fair leasing policy. So phase 2 land reforms is concentrating on these 3 areas. The first one, very important. In India, a lot of people had land with them but having presumptive title. This presumptive title has to be converted into conclusive title. What is presumptive title? You are cultivating the land for generations, but you do not have any land records. So you cannot sell. You have only presumptive title. You have your own house there. You are having 5 to 10 acres, cultivating spices. You are getting income from that. But even today, you do not have any ownership right. You have only presumptive title and not conclusive title. Conclusive title ഉണ്ടെങ്കിലേ നമുക്ക് പണയം വയ്ക്കാൻ പറ്റുള്ളൂ. Presumptive title ഉണ്ടെങ്കിൽ പണയം വയ്ക്കാൻ ഒക്കില്ല. Lot of people, you heard in the newspapers that suicides took place. You want to get an education loan and you want to pledge your land, it is not possible because you have only a presumptive title and not conclusive title. So that is why the National Land Records Management Program was started in 2008. National Land Records Management Program, where you are using even drone, aerial recording of the land, so that fair conclusive title is given to the farmers, because by generations they will be using that particular land, but you have only presumptive title and not conclusive title. So that was the first space. Second, look, our economy is growing. We require a lot of land. Suppose you want to build a highway. That highway has to pass through, say, an agriculture field. There will not be any development if there is no infrastructure. If the gas pipe has to be taken from one place to another, definitely some land has to be taken. That may be agricultural land. So a lot of problems were created, a lot of tensions were created when economy grows. Suppose you want to start a special economic zone. Suppose you want to start an industrial estate. Land is less in number, it's fixed in supply. Population is rising, but the land remains the same. So some land has to be taken out. It may be an agriculture field for economic growth. But people are not ready to part with the land. Now what was the reason? Because they must get fair compensation, equitable compensation. So that is why in land reform, another important area took place. Land Acquisition Bill has been passed in 2013 by amending Land Acquisition Rehabilitation Resettlement Act of 2011. 2011 നിയമം ഉണ്ടായിരുന്നു, അത് ചില അമെൻഡ് ചെയ്തിട്ട് ലാൻഡ് അക്വിസിഷൻ ബിൽ ഓഫ് 2013 ഉണ്ട്. പക്ഷേ മോദി ഗവൺമെന്റ് വന്നപ്പോൾ 2015 they changed. Fair compensation and transparency of Land Acquisition, Resettlement and Rehabilitation Act of 2015. Fair compensation and transparency. So first we have to take the people in confidence, give them fair compensation. If the market price is, say, for one piece, 1 cent of land is 10,000, give them 30,000. So he will be happy. Not only fair compensation, but resettlement. They have to, if they are moved away from that particular place, they must be given some other land, some place of dwelling, some facilities. So they have to be resettled. Rehabilitate them. If a person had a shop in a particular area, if his land is taken, he must be given alternative space for doing his business. If all these facilities are given and then the land is taken, definitely people will cooperate. They must be given good compensation, they have to be resettled, they have to be even rehabilitated. So that act was passed in 2015. But even that, lot of problems are created. Wild illegal, that is another serious taking place in our country. Singur, without giving fair compensation, they are forced to move away from the land. So such things, that is also for Tata, for constructing nano car. But that did not took place. They went to Ahmedabad and they started nano car there. So if they are given jobs, a person who is lifted from that particular area will get a job in nano car factory. So people will be happy, they get good compensation, they will be given separate place of dwelling. So that is called fair compensation, transparency in all things. Compensation, not only compensation, transparency in rehabilitation, resettlement. That was passed in 2015. So that is phase 2. What the Kerala government has done, recently an important thing has been done by the Kerala government. If a person cultivates the land correctly, he does not move away from the land. If he cultivates and same piece of land is cultivated everywhere, he will be given royalty, very important. For 1 hectare he gets 2,000 rupees as royalty. So what is happening in Kerala, a lot of people are living from agriculture, they are keeping the land barren, they are not cultivating and they are not also giving to the other people for cultivation. The system is changing in Kerala. So any person who cultivates, he will get royalty. Royalty for 1 hectare, 2,000 rupees. So that is very important. Then in the leasing side, that's very important. Why leasing must be given more importance? Fair, efficient leasing system has to be adopted. I will give an example. If a person is in Dubai, is working in Dubai, he has a 10 acre of land in his native place. He keeps the land barren without cultivation. If leasing concept is adopted, for say 10 years he can let the land. He can give the land for cultivation to say 10 years. He get lease rental. the land will be cultivated properly by the other person. He can give to self-help groups. He can give to the farmers organizations to cultivate. So he can sublet the land, here the productivity rises, the land will not be wasted, and he gets the income also out of it. Long-term leasing policy in agriculture will help, and that will also help for even the corporates to enter into this particular area and cultivate a large piece of land. And land title will not be lost. He is the owner of the land. If a person has a 5 acre of land in, say, in Thrissur, gets a Staff Selection Commission appointment in New Delhi Secretariat. So he has to stay for years in New Delhi. Stay for years in New Delhi. He may be having a 5 acre of land in Thrissur. It is kept idle. Now he can lease out for say 10 to 15 years. He gets lease rental, gets the income, at the same time he can be, when he comes back, the ownership will not be lost. It can be given to self-help groups. Kudumbashri kodukam. 5 acre, they will cultivate. And you will not lose the title. You are the owner of the land. You will be ready to migrate also. Some people are not ready to migrate because the land will be kept idle here. So now he can migrate very easily and search out better jobs in other areas. So these are the 3 important areas in the phase 2 of the land reforms. Land reform measures, very lengthy ആണ്. ഇതിലെ സബ് ഹെഡ്സ് ചെറുതായിട്ട് സബ്സെറ്റ്സ് പറഞ്ഞ സബ് ഹെഡ്സിലൊക്കെ ചെറിയ ചെറിയ ചോദ്യങ്ങളായിട്ട് പരീക്ഷയ്ക്ക് വരും. Now we are moving to another area called cropping pattern. Cropping pattern in India, another important area. Cropping pattern. Now what is cropping pattern? It is the area under different crops at a particular point of time. Very important. Cropping pattern means the area of different crops in a particular area at a particular point of time. What is the change in cropping pattern? What is the changes that took place in the different crop in areas over a period of time? That is the difference between change in cropping pattern and what is cropping pattern. Change in cropping pattern and what is cropping pattern. It's only at a point of time the different area under different crops. But change means over the period of time what has happened. If you look at the beginning of the 20th century in India, you can see that 83% of the area was under food crops and 17% of the area was under cash crops. So at the beginning of the 20th century, naturally industries were not in a big way. People have a subsistence way of living, so they used to cultivate only for themselves. So they gave more importance to food crops. They never gave much importance to cash crops. A few crops, cash crops were there available. So the ratio was 83:17. 83:17. But in 1950-51, you can see that there is a change. The change was 74:26. So what has happened there in 50-51? Only 74% importance was given to the food crops, but 26% importance shifted in favor of cash crops. That was a period when people were moving from subsistence farming to commercial farming. They shifted from subsistence farming to commercial farming. Commercial farming means they will cultivate for money. So more important was given to cash crops, especially cotton textiles, for which we require cotton. For jute textile industry developed, so they have to produce raw jute. Sugar industry came, so we have to produce sugar cane. which is sold out to get money. So 74:26. Then a big change took place after the Green Revolution. Green Revolution, when it took place, there was a change. It became 80:20. Now what was the reason? Agriculture commodities started giving high price. Inflation in agriculture commodities, especially food items, food products, food crops, the price started rising. And one of the reasons is said that MSP, minimum support price for different commodities, were given by the government. So naturally what will happen, when MSP rises, the price in the market rises above that. So whenever the MSP increase, the price will go up. Farmers get better prices for food crops, rice, wheat, and a lot of other commodities, pulses, millets, etc. So it again became 80:20. See the changes in cropping pattern. 83:17, then became 74:26. But after Green Revolution, when the farmers started getting better prices for their rice, wheat, pulses, millets, etc., naturally an MSP was also fixed by the government and the farmers are getting better prices. So they shifted again from cash crops to food crops. It became 80:20. Now the range is between 75:25. Industrial growth when takes place, for example rubber, a lot of people in Kerala, they shifted from food crops to plantation crops. Plantation crops basically cash crops. So there is no uniformity. At a particular point of time, some crops will be cultivated, but over a period of time, changes will take place. So here a question can be asked, a short question can be asked, what is the cropping pattern? But another essay can be asked, what are the factors that contributed to cropping pattern in our country? Again, you have to give an a lot of points has to be given. The first point is physical and technical factors. Cropping pattern always depends upon the physical factors and technical factors. For example, if you look at the physical factors, the soil, climate, rainfall, all this plays a very important part. In a hilly region, plantation crops flourishes. A country, if it has a larger area under the rainfall area, naturally rice will be cultivated. If in a country, if the particular area gets very often less rain, definitely you go for some crops. In Rajasthan, in some parts of Madhya Pradesh, they used to cultivate millets. Millets means jowar, bajra, ragi. Ragi in southern states and jowar and bajra in Rajasthan and Madhya Pradesh, they used to cultivate. Now what is the reason? It does not require more rain. So people cultivate, if you go to the Munnar area, more cabbage, cauliflower, etc. cultivate because the climate is suitable. So the physical factor plays a very important part in cropping pattern. So physical. At the same time, technical also. Why Punjab, lot of areas were under wheat cultivation? So the main reason was the technical. More equipments, mechanization of agriculture took place in a better manner in the Punjab area. So that is why we say that the Green Revolution succeeded in Punjab. We started using tractors, power tiller, sowing machine, harvesting machine, pump sets. Similarly, Bakranangal Dam. Bakranangal Dam played a very important part because dam was constructed, good infrastructure, providing water to the areas of Punjab, Haryana, parts of Rajasthan, Uttar Pradesh, some parts of Uttar Pradesh, etc. So that's the system, technical side. So a lot of equipments, if it is available in a particular area, you are ready to shift from one to another. So first point is physical and technical factors brings about a change in the cropping pattern. Second, very important, economic factors. In economic factors, it is maximization of income and price. Price movements and income maximization. These are the two important economic area where the cropping pattern depends. Of course, if a particular commodity has more rise in price, people will shift from one crop to another. I will give the best example of Kerala. When the price of vanilla started rising in a big way, people shifted from the spices, especially kurumulagu, black gram, to vanilla. But if all the people try to cultivate vanilla by giving up the other one, what will happen? The price will come down. But when the price comes down, the price of black gram starts rising. Pepper starts rising. So people again shift from vanilla to pepper. So what is the factor that played a very important part? Price played a very important part. A lot of people shifted from one crop to another when the price of a particular commodity starts rising at a high level. So price movement plays a very important part. And the second one is income maximization. From where you get more income. A lot of people shifted from the food crops to cash crops because of creating more income. A lot of people in Kerala, even the rice fields were converted into rubber plantations because when the price of rubber started rising at a high level, they shifted. So they want to have more income with them. Some crops will be given up because it does not eat more income. So income maximization. Some people, they shifted to varieties of crops so that they get maximum income. Before they used to cultivate a single crop. Now they started a multiple cropping system to get more income from that particular field. So what made a change? Because of the maximization of income on the one side, and the second one is price, high prices. Farm size, very important. If a person has a larger farm with him, he will cultivate a single crop. If a person has 100 acres, he will cultivate, say in a Munnar area, he will cultivate a tea plantation. But large farm leads to single crop. But if a person has a small farm, he goes after multiple cropping. So, but empirical study conducted in UP clearly says that even the small farm, some people concentrate only in a single crop, especially sugar cane. So that may be because of they are getting remunerative prices, higher price for the commodity. But normally we say that a person if he has a large farm, he will cultivate a single crop, but if it is a small farm, to get more income, he will try to diversify. He goes after a variety of crops. So size plays a very important part. Insurance against risk, third economic side. Insurance against risk. Now why the people nowadays will not cultivate a single crop? Even a person if he has a big farm, he will try to cultivate varieties of crops so that the loss made in one crop in a particular period will be compensated with a high profit created by the some other crops. That is insurance against risk. A lot of cultivators, cotton cultivators of Maharashtra. They recently started they have kept 1 or 2 acres for cultivation of orange. In Punjab, lot of people shifted. Some piece of land will be shifted to some other crops because it does not require more care and every year. So a long-term yield. If you are cultivating rice or wheat, it is short term. If something happens in that particular period, you lose the money. But that's a long term. So why they do different types of crops, some food crops, certain cash crops. If you go to Ernakulam, a lot of people have land, at least they have 1 or 2 cash crops with them. And some food crops also with them. Insurance against risk. So what is lost in a particular crop during a particular period will be compensated with the profit created in some other area. So agriculture will not be a loss venture, it is a profitable venture. So insurance against risk. Then tenure plays a very important part. And I said that in India even today, a lot of tenants, tenants. But tenant what to cultivate depends upon the landlord. If I take a piece of land from the landlord and cultivate, it is the landlord decides. He says that this crop should not be cultivated. So tenure plays a very important part. He will say that you should not cultivate this crop. You have to cultivate only this one. So the say is on the part of the landlord. So that also influences the cropping pattern. So that is economic side. And third one is political side. In political side, very important point. The cropping pattern can make a change if the government introduces certain programs, measures, etc. That is very important. For example, this government, you can see that a lot of young people started cultivating rice. They formed their societies, they formed their group, and they started taking the land which was kept barren. Upper government policies and measures can also bring a change in the cropping pattern. If a lot of incentive is given, a lot of benefits are given. The first time that in Kerala, even vegetables are given the MSP, minimum support price. If the price falls below the MSP, all the vegetables at the particular price will be taken by the government through societies. They will be fairly compensated. So if you give a lot of schemes and programs, it shifts the people from shifting from one crop to another, at the same time stay in agriculture itself. Land Use Act. Agricultural land should not be utilized for other purposes. Rice area should not be shifted to some other crops. Land Use Act. So a lot of measures of the government also forces the people to shift from one crop to another. So this is another important essay. What are the factors that influences cropping pattern? Now we will move to another important area, agricultural finance. The finance is the lifeblood of a business. Business ചെയ്യണമെങ്കിൽ ഫൈനാൻസ് വേണം, പണം ഇല്ലാതെ ബിസിനസ് ചെയ്യാൻ ഒക്കില്ല. ലൈഫ് ബ്ലഡ് ഓഫ് ബിസിനസ്. Indian farmer actually has different sources of finance, both organized and unorganized. Now in 1951-52, All India Rural Credit Survey Committee, it's called Balwant Rai Mehta Committee, All India Rural Credit Survey Committee. A committee came with an important document. They visited almost 2.5 lakh villages. Of course, 2.5 lakh means more than it comes to say nearly 40 to 50% of the villages, because India had 5,64,000 villages. In 2.5 lakh villages in 1951 52, they conducted a survey and they said that commercial banks are giving only 1% of the requirements to the farmers. 1% only. All the commercial banks in India are giving only 1% loans to the farmers. Cooperative societies 3%, but 70% was given by money lenders and indigenous bankers. That was in 1951-52. And remaining their own funds. So 74 കഴിഞ്ഞാൽ ബാക്കി 26% their own funds, സ്വന്തം പൈസ ഉപയോഗിച്ച് കൃഷി ചെയ്യുക. See, the situation has changed a lot. But even today, 13% of the requirements of farmers are met by money lenders and indigenous bankers. That is a serious problem in our country. So when we studied about the agriculture finance, finance is required to the farmers for 3 purposes. It requires fund for short-term purposes, say 1 year. Short-term purpose means 1 year. They will have to take loan from the banks or other financial institutions for say 6 months or 8 months, 3 months, maximum up to 1 year. That is means immediately after the harvest, he will repay the amount, then take again loan. So that is called short term. He also requires, so these short term funds are required mainly for working capital requirements of the farmer, to purchase the seed, to purchase the fertilizers, pesticides, small implements, for manbatti vaangiram. Ingane cheriya amount vendittu they take a loan which has to be repaid maximum within 1 year. He also requires medium term funds, say for 3 years, 5 years, up to 5 years. The amount will be little higher, for which he has to pledge the land or something, get more money to buy some machines, to buy certain equipments, fencing of the land or etc. Small piece of land if we have, for which we require more fund. So that is called medium term. Similarly, Indian farmer also requires long term funds, which will be repaid say after say 15 to 20 years, for making certain permanent improvement on the land, for fencing of the land say for 10 to 15 acres, to have a factory or a small machines to be installed, for processing work. For example, vanilla. If it is not processed and sent directly sold in the market, you get very low price. If it is processed, dried and then sold out, you get a high price for the product. So for that you require a small factory unit, for which you require more funds. Suppose you have a rubber plantation, say 10 to 50 acres. Suppose you want to start certain units, rubber band unit, gloves making units. So you can pledge your land and take a loan. So Indian farmer requires short term, medium term and long term funds. From where he gets? This will divide into 2, organized and unorganized. Now if you look at the organized side, the most important one is cooperative credit societies. Cooperative credit societies. Now I am talking in terms of the Indian level. Again, cooperation is a state subject, and therefore the law has to be passed by the respective state government. It cannot be passed by the central government. Cooperation itself is a state subject. In Kerala, we are using Cooperative Society Act of 1969. So every state will have its own Cooperative Society Act. Based on that, they can form the society. In India, cooperative society structure, if you look at, it is 3-tier. What is 3-tier structure? Or it is called pyramid in character. Pyramid in character means at the top we have state cooperative bank, and the middle we have district cooperative bank or central cooperative bank, and at the bottom we have primary agricultural cooperative credit societies. So at the top we have only one, that is called Kerala State Cooperative Bank. Every state will have there only one. Karnataka State Cooperative Bank, Tamil Nadu State Cooperative Bank, at top only one. In the middle we have district cooperative bank, or it is also called central cooperative bank, and at the bottom we have primary agricultural cooperative credit societies. So it is pyramid in character, or it is 3-tier structure. Now, primary agricultural credit societies are voluntary association of people. In a village, if the people wants the society, they can form. Some promoters will be there, they will prepare the bylaw, lay down the objectives, and they will approach the registrar of the cooperative societies in the particular state. They will approach the department and apply for the society's registration. They will come and visit the place, and if they found to be good, they will give the registration. So thereby the society comes into existence. So actually it is a voluntary of people. So then the people will join together by purchasing the shares. Here the cooperative society in India is a democratic principle based. One man, one vote is the principle. In a company you can purchase number of shares, but in a cooperative society, if you buy any number of shares, you have only one vote. One man, one vote is the principle. It's called cooperative society. District cooperative bank or central cooperative bank is only a federation of the primary societies, and state cooperative bank is a federation of district cooperative banks. At the top we have another one which is called NABARD, National Bank for Agriculture and Rural Development, started in 1982. It's called NABARD. So NABARD is the apex body for giving fund to the primary societies, not directly but indirectly. So how the fund flows? Since a primary society, the majority of people are very poor, they do not have more fund, so they cannot lend. So they have to approach the district cooperative bank. District cooperative bank has its own lot of activities, so they are not able to fund the primary societies. State cooperative bank can lend out downwards, but they may not be having, they may be having more constraints. So it is actually the NABARD, started in 1982, which gives huge fund to different state cooperative banks. The fund will come slowly downwards to district cooperative bank. From district cooperative bank comes to the primary society. And from the society, it reaches to the farmers. But the speed will be very fast downwards, but it will not go upwards. If the farmers, if they repay the amount, then it goes to the district cooperative bank. From the district cooperative, it goes to the state cooperative bank. From that, it again goes back to NABARD. So NABARD again will give fund. So why in India majority of society are dormant? Because if the funds is not coming from top, almost all the primary societies will be dormant, they will not function properly. So that is the reason why the cooperative structure, the cooperative system has failed in India, but it must succeed. It's failed in India, but it must succeed. So cooperative society can play a very important part because it's created by the people itself. Democratic principle is working. It is not working for profit. Profit word should not be used in cooperative society. The word that has to be used is surplus. And surplus must be used for purpose of the better purpose of the society's members, their families. They should not use the word or give incentives. They should not use the word profit because it's not created for profit purposes. So cooperative society in a country can play a very important part. So one organized system is cooperative society. Second one is organized part, commercial banks. Up to 1969, commercial bank did not play a very important part. If you look at it was only in 1955 that the State Bank of India was created, SBI. That is the first bank. It was nationalized by nationalizing the Imperial Bank of India. In 1959, state associated banks were created. State Bank of Travancore, State Bank of Mysore, all these are now merged with SBI. But the major bank nationalization took place in 1969, only after the Green Revolution. That took place in 66, 67. So that is very important. It was only in 1980, 6 more banks were nationalized. One was in 19 July, that was another in 15 August. 19 July 1969, 15 August 1980. Sorry, not 15 August, some period, 1980. So, it is only with the coming of the public sector banks that a lot of change has taken place as with the commercial banks are concerned in agriculture. Before that, private commercial banks reluctant to open branches in the villages. Even if it is open, they are not ready to give loans to the farmers because they felt that the money will not come back. So it is only after the bank nationalization. Lot of branches, 70% of the new branches that was open after bank nationalization has gone in favor of the villages or semi-urban areas. Lot of agriculture branches were started. Agriculture development branches, ADB. Agriculture development branches were created. Village adoption scheme, VAS. Village adoption scheme, Gramangale Dattadukka, Bangalore. Lot of villages were taken up by banks, providing a lot of funds to the farmers. So that played a very important part. When the competition took place, then naturally the private commercial banks also started giving loans. So commercial banks are playing a very important part for giving loans to the people. Kisan credit cards, 5,000 rupees is available to the account at any time. They can withdraw the amount at any time. They need not depend upon money lenders or indigenous bankers. So this is a big change that took place. So commercial bank is another organized part. Third one is Gramina Bank, Regional Rural Bank, RRBs, started in 1975. Regional Rural Bank started in 1975. 5 branches were started in the beginning as a pilot project. Then they thought that it had become a success. Then they shifted to other areas also. But the number has now been reduced to almost 42. 169 RRBs were there in the country. Its main aim is to give maximum benefit to the small farmers, marginal farmers, landless laborers, small artisans, scheduled castes, scheduled tribes, etc. But a regional bank has to be created by, it must be sponsored by a commercial bank. So they are also playing a very important part, regional rural banks. Now it is called Gramina Bank. So they are also helping the farmers to get a lot of funds, where credit worthiness is given more importance. They do not require more surety. Credit worthiness of a person, character of a farmer is given more importance. But the number has been reduced to 42 because a lot of regional banks are merged together to become Gramina. For example, Kerala, we have South Malabar Gramina Bank, North Malabar Gramina Bank. These two are merged to become Kerala Gramina Bank. So number is reduced, but they are also playing a very important part as an organized part of the banking system, helping to farmers. Land Development Bank. Land development. For giving long-term loans to the farmers. Up to this area, you can see that short-term and medium terms loans were given by these institutions. But the long-term loan is given by Land Development Bank. The old name was Land Mortgage Bank, Bhu Panay Bank. Now the name has been changed, converted into Land Development Bank, Bhu Vikasana Bank. But this is benefiting only the rich farmers. Because you have to mortgage Panay Vakiram. In a country, majority of people are tenants. They do not have their own land. Similarly, large number of farmers in India has marginal land with them. Small pieces of land, tiny pieces of land. So they cannot approach Land Development Bank. Only big farmers, for making permanent improvement on the land, they require huge amount, they can approach and take loan. So normally it is said that it is like a drop in a big ocean. Big ocean is the requirement of a farmer, in which a drop is actually Land Development Bank. So that is another important area, but an organized part. Land Development Bank. Then government also gives loan. People may not be aware that government also gives loan to the farmers in times of emergencies or crisis. And the name of that particular loan is called Takavi loan. Taccavi. Takavi loan. Takavi loan is given by the government to the farmers in times of emergencies or crisis. If something happens to that particular piece of land, heavy rainfall, a bursting of the cloud, avalanche, everything is destroyed. Because of that, they can approach the government. So it is a North Indian term, Takavi loan. It has to become very popular, but the most unpopular loan in India. Takavi loan is called the most unpopular. Now what is the reason? Because it is a government loan. To get that particular loan, you have to approach. There is a lengthy process. It takes almost say 4 to 5 months, 6 months to get that particular loan. By the time your field will be fully destroyed, immediately you require fund if something happens. But you have to wait for months. So this must be the popular loan, but became unpopular because something happens in different parts of the country at any time. So they can approach the government. So these are the organized part. But if you look at the unorganized part is we have two important things, that is money lenders and indigenous bankers. Money lenders dominates in villages. They give loans both for productive and productive purposes. But if you approach the organized part, they give loan only to the organized area only, productive purpose only. They will not give loan for unproductive purposes. But if you approach the money lenders, he gives loan for productive as well as unproductive purposes. If a farmer wants to go to a place where festival takes place, he gives the fund. If he wants to go to the marriage of a person, the money lender gives the fund. But bank will never give such loans. So immediately if he requires funds, even today he approaches the money lenders. But money lender charges exorbitant rates of interest. That is why it is commonly said that in India, Indian farmer is born in debt, he lives in debt, and he dies in debt. But debt will not, after his death, debt will not be over. It is shifted to the eldest son. So what is happening? So whenever you require fund, you approach the money lenders, take fund, because He knows each and every person in the village, his financial position, his character, everything is known to the moneylender. So by saying that, he gives the fund, but his ultimate aim is to grabbing the land of the farmers. By giving huge amount of money, since he is not able to repay, finally the land goes to the moneylender. So in India, we have two types of moneylender. One is called professional moneylenders. They only lend money and leave with the interest they get. Second is trader cum moneylender. Actually, he may be a trader. He gives money to the farmers to cultivate, but during the harvesting time, he comes and then takes the whole crop by forcing the person to sell at a lower price. Agriculturist cum moneylender. So money lending is a side business. So these two types of money lenders dominate in our villages. That is why we call that money lenders are like a spider on the cobweb. Chalandire parthirikina, chalandi polyana money lenders. And small farmers are small insects. If they fall, his life is over. So that is very important. Indigenous bankers also playing a very important part. Indigenous bankers are actually like bankers. They accept deposit, they lend money. Money lenders will never accept money, they only lend. But all these two are charging exorbitant rates of interest. They charge exorbitant rates of interest which cannot be repaid by the farmers because by his meager cultivation. So money lenders and indigenous bankers, they also play a very important part in our economy, but they are not good. They must be removed from your country as early as possible. But due to a number of factors, when today they dominate in our villages. So if agriculture finance, what are the different sources of agriculture finance? Then you must be able to write in two ways, organized and unorganized. Suppose an organized part is only asked in the question, then you have to write only that. If a major essay is asked, both organized and unorganized part plays a very important part for giving loans to the farmers. So with this, I will conclude today's lecture.